may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, guys, I know y'all are not going to like this video. Now, this is something that I've had to talk about multiple times on the Dynasty channel, but the reason you don't see a lot of videos on YouTube where people come out and they say this player's overvalued is because these are the videos that get dislikes. These are the videos that get ignored in the YouTube algorithm because people really want to hear about quote-unquote undervalued players that are going to succeed at the NFL level. That's why every single prospect comparison you hear, hey, player X is the next Arian Foster. Hey, player X is the next Antonio Brown. Where in reality, the chances of that happening are less than 1%. But if you say it's going to happen in a video, then you're going to get a ton of views and nobody's going to remember 12 months from now. Where I don't necessarily care too much about that. What I would rather do is I would rather come out here, try to be completely honest, try to identify some of these players I think are going to be a little bit overhyped or a little bit overvalued. Because if you can avoid those landmines, then you are going to be at such an advantage in your fantasy draft, because we understand that a lot of the times in the early rounds, it's not identifying the player that's going to all of a sudden be jumping up to 28 points per game that's going to win you the league. What is actually going to provide you a ton of value is not drafting Leonard Fournette in the third round, not drafting that player that is being drastically overvalued and going to tank your season. So what we are going to be doing here is we are going to be talking about some of these rookies. Now, no, we have not had the NFL draft yet, so situations can change things. If maybe you have one of these players going to the best situation in the entire NFL, then we can go, hey, you know what? I was wrong. I'm going to take the L. We are all in on this player. But anyway, let's dive into this. And our first guy we are going to be talking about is going to be Rashad Bateman. Now, I know Rashad Bateman, the hype train has slowed down a little bit, and I don't want to take responsibility for this or anything, but we have been kind of banging the drum saying Rashad Bateman is not who y'all think he is, because you've been hearing a few analysts come on and just say, hey, the metrics, the analytical profile is through the roof compared to another wide receiver like Devontae Smith, compared to some other wide receivers like Jalen Waddle, where they're looking at Rashad Bateman and not necessarily taking everything into consideration. Where first thing that we can talk about with Bateman is, yes, it is nice that he's coming into the NFL after his true junior season. That has direct correlation over to NFL success. Yes, it's nice that he does not profile to be a field-stretching wide receiver. He actually profiles as someone that's going to come into the NFL and see a decent amount of volume and should be able to do something with it. But at the end of the day, while he may be a little bit oversized for some of these other wide receivers in the NFL draft, like an Elijah Moore, like a Rondale Moore, like a Devontae Smith, he himself is still an undersized wide receiver. He himself is still a wide receiver we are not confident is going to get the NFL draft capital. And this is not a wide receiver that has an elite production profile. Now, I know a lot of people want to come out and say, but Mason, the reason he did not hit that Elijah Moore type production is because he was playing alongside Tyler Johnson. And my argument to that is, yes, I understand that Rashad Bateman was playing with Tyler Johnson when Tyler Johnson was a senior and Rashad Bateman was a sophomore. But if you were this Devontae Smith type player, if you were this guy we should be considering as an elite wide receiver, you should be able to get through that. You should be able to come out and still dominate the yardage, still dominate the target share on your own college offense. And that simply did not happen. So comparing Rashad Bateman to some other wide receivers in the NFL draft who have more production, just look at a Rondale Moore, look at an Elijah Moore, two guys that, yes, have size concerns, but Bateman does as well. And you actually have way more production and a nicer athletic profile with the other two wide receivers. Then you can compare him to a couple of guys that maybe don't have the early career production as Rashad Bateman in Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, but you can understand why when they were playing in a collegiate system where they weren't competing for targets with Tyler Johnson. Instead, they were competing for targets with wide receivers like Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, these guys that were all top 15 picks at the NFL level. So with Bateman here, he's not a very bad wide receiver, but I just think because there are a few people just hyping on this Rashad Bateman hype train, I think that we are just going to be steering clear. We're going to go, you know what? I'll take the guy in Elijah Moore that's going to come at a much cheaper cost, and he has a better production profile to go along with the fact that he's a better athlete. So I think in the case of Rashad Bateman, it's not that he's a bad player himself. It's just that some other wide receivers in that range I'm going to like slightly more because they're going to come at a cheaper cost with people not pumping them up as much. All right, now our next player is actually going to be at the running back position, and I know that this is going to be another guy that people hate to hear because he is a lot of people's number one running back in the class in Naja Harris. Okay, so guys, I admit Naja Harris, compared to the other running backs in this draft class, is elite. He is an elite prospect if you're comparing him to a Javonte Williams, a Michael Carter Jr., if you're comparing him to Chuba Hubbard. But that doesn't mean, compared to these other veterans at the NFL level, that Naja Harris should be up there and the same consideration that other top rookie prospects of past year's drafts, they were getting that hype. Guys like Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, Saquon Barkley, those players that came in with a full-proof player profile where Naja Harris simply doesn't have that. So starting the offseason, I came out here and I said, I don't know if Naja Harris or Travis Etienne is going to be my running back one because they both have their questions. They both have things to prove at their respective pro days. In the case of Travis Etienne, he had to prove that he had a BMI where he could go and see a 3-down workload at the NFL level. And in the case of Naja Harris, he had to prove that he had, at the very minimum, an average 40-yard dash time because we understand that speed score at the NFL level actually is an indication of what the full potential is for one of these running backs. Very rarely, very, very rarely do you get an Arian Foster who is able to come in with a below average 40-yard dash time and then provide you with that elite upside for fantasy football success. And in the case of Travis Etienne, he actually came out and he made us not worry about him in the slightest. By weighing in at 215 pounds, he said, hey, I can be a 3-down running back and I have everything else to go with my profile. In the case of Naja Harris, a player who is way older than what you want to see these rookie running backs be, we know that, no, it's not going to make Naja Harris a worse running back with where he is now. But if you just look at historical trends, the running backs that come in at the age of Naja Harris, they have a very bad hit rate. I will tell you that. And to go along with it, Naja Harris, guys, the 40-yard dash time coming out of high school, which directly correlates to what it would be coming out of college, and the fact that you don't see any long touchdowns from Naja Harris at Alabama, it's worrisome when he doesn't run the 40 at his pro day. So now, with Naja Harris, you have a running back that can catch passes, but he's not fantastic at it. You have a running back that is probably below average in his top-end speed to go along with the fact that he is a much older prospect than what you want to see from a historical hit rate perspective. So adding all these things up, we can still sit here and we can still say, you know what? Yeah, Naja Harris has great things. He has great contact balance. He's going to be one of the best running backs with actually taking that contact and continuing to go. But if we're just talking about pure fantasy football upside, I simply don't think Naja Harris comes close to the running back prospects that we've had in the past of a DeAndre Swift, of a J.K. Dobbins, of a Jonathan Taylor, of a Cam Akers, guys that we just saw last year. And Travis Etienne checks almost every single box on the other hand. So Naja Harris, if you go to our Patreon rookie rankings, you're going to find there that he is our running back 2 currently. And unless he lands in a situation where maybe he gets that first round NFL draft capital to the Pittsburgh Steelers and they show that they want to use him as a 3-down running back, then we can walk back everything we said. Then we can go, okay, now he should get the workload, even if we don't think he has the top in speed, even if we don't like the historical hit rates for running backs at this age. We can just acknowledge that the situation is so good, he should be able to overcome it. But until that happens, Naja Harris, I'm going to be lower on than consensus. Okay, now speaking of a running back that does not check boxes, let's go over to Michael Carter Jr. And I know, guys, we have gotten so much hate for me coming out here talking about how Michael Carter Jr. is overvalued in Dynasty. And I don't necessarily understand why y'all are so excited. Now, everybody in the comment section is saying, Mason, put on the tape. Mason, look at what he can do in making defenders miss. Look at his agility. Look at his 3-cone. And I'm sitting here going, Guys, have y'all really looked at what the top running backs in the NFL bring to the table? Because none of the elite running backs that we have seen in recent past look like Michael Carter Jr. Not a single one. Michael Carter Jr. is drastically undersized. Not only is he undersized, but more importantly, what you are finding is he does not have that top end speed. And while, yes, we can sit here and we can go, you know what? He probably would have had a great receiving profile if he wasn't playing in the same backfield as Javonte Williams. But we simply can't say for certain that he would have seen that target share that would have put him in the elite range for a running back prospect. Even if we give him the credit of playing with Javonte Williams, we're still looking at a running back that film grinders absolutely love. They go, you don't understand with Michael Carter Jr. He simply can do things with making defenders miss that other running backs can't. And that's fine. Maybe he is so fun to watch on film. Maybe he is one of the most fun running backs in college football. If you're going, look at the little guy go. Look at what he can do with making defenders miss in the box. But another running back that people said this with, another running back that was undersized and was not as athletic as you would want to see, was Devin Singletary, someone that we looked at and went, you know what? He probably has a high floor because everybody that watches the tape says he can do this. He can make defenders miss. Yes, I will acknowledge the fact that Michael Carter Jr. probably has a high floor. He's probably going to be a committee running back right away in the NFL. But what is the ceiling? What do you all truly think the ceiling is for a running back that is this small, that doesn't have the type of athleticism of an Austin Eckler? He doesn't have that elite athletic profile that you can find with receiving running backs that can overcome their lack of size, that can overcome the fact that they are not going to be seeing 20 touches a game. So if you don't have that athletic profile, if you don't have the size for you to be able to handle a full-time workload, simply there is no upside. There is no upside at all. You don't have the upside to be a workhorse running back. You don't have the upside to be highly efficient with the touches that you do see. So Michael Carter Jr., yeah, maybe he has a high floor, but why are you going to be drafting a running back for their floor? That's the last thing that you're wanting to do in fantasy. What you're wanting to do in fantasy is draft these players for their ceiling. And Michael Carter Jr.'s ceiling is going to be a lot lower than what most people want to assume. Okay, so now our next quarterback before we get to Kyle Pitts is actually going to be Mac Jones. And here with Mac Jones, I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to act like we grinded the all-22 tape. I'm not going to be giving y'all my take on what he can be for a quarterback at the NFL level. I am simply going to be sitting here and saying, guys, if you are checking out our rookie draft kit that we have over on Patreon, you are going to see the trends that we have had over the past decade for the league becoming more and more reliant on those rushing quarterbacks to provide you elite fantasy football upside. Now, if you're a quarterback that does not project to be able to see 150 rushing yards a season at the very minimum, and you aren't going to be an Aaron Rodgers, you're not going to be that prime pocket passing quarterback that can come out here with a ridiculous touchdown rate, you simply don't have upside in fantasy. And just like we were talking about with Michael Carter Jr., it doesn't matter if Mac Jones comes in and he has a very high floor. It doesn't matter if Mac Jones comes in and he has a guaranteed starting job and a good offense. Now, if you're playing in a dynasty superflex league where players like Kirk Cousins, players like Baker Mayfield, they're actually worth a decent amount in fantasy because you can start them every week, I'm fine with that. But in the case of Mac Jones, if you're playing in a one quarterback redraft league for 2021, I would not roster him under any circumstance. If you're playing in a 12-man league, that's a one quarterback league for 2021, there is no reason to ever be talking about Mac Jones, as he is not a quarterback that has any rushing upside at all. I know that he has some mobility in the pocket, but that's not going to be translating over to rushing touchdowns. That's not going to be translating over to rushing yards. And simply, if you're going to be betting on a quarterback being a top 10 quarterback in today's age without having access to, at the very minimum, 200 rushing yards in a season, you are betting on an outlier. And that's as simple as we can put it. All right, so now let's get to probably the most exciting tight end prospect that we have ever seen. It's going to be Kyle Pitts. Now, yes, guys, I can sit here and I can go, Kyle Pitts is the best tight end prospect that we have ever had come into the NFL. If you look at his athletic measurables, if you look at his receiving production that he had coming out of Florida, Kyle Pitts is generational. Nobody is arguing against that. And that is the problem in fantasy right now. The problem in fantasy right now is everybody is agreeing that Kyle Pitts is the best tight end prospect that we pretty much have ever seen. Now, what people aren't talking about, on the other hand, is what this means for 2021 fantasy football production. Because if you go through recent years past, even comparing Kyle Pitts to top prospects in their respective classes that weren't as good as Pitts, we're going to say that right out the gate. You simply don't have rookie tight ends making an impact. It doesn't matter if it's TJ Hawkinson. It doesn't matter if it's Noah Fant, Cole Kmet, David Njoku, OJ Howard, Eric Ebron, any of these top tight ends that have come out in the NFL. Really, the most recent example that we have of a rookie tight end producing right away was an Evan Ingram. And Evan Ingram, his rookie season, did not play tight end. He pretty much played a big slot wide receiver role. So it's hard to even throw him in the same bucket. But with Kyle Pitts here, guys, yes, an elite prospect, but I highly encourage you to go through and read some scouting reports from David Njoku, OJ Howard back in 2017, and what people thought they were going to be coming into the NFL right away. And then look at the historical hit rates that we've had from these rookie tight ends making a fantasy football impact. It simply doesn't happen. So while everybody else is drafting Kyle Pitts in 2021 for redraft leagues, I'm going to be happily taking the Noah Fant. I'm going to be happily taking the veteran that's been around for 3 years, that has been able to implement himself in his offensive system, and that has some reps under his belt and know what's going to be going on. Okay, now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Of course, if y'all did, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. And yeah, that's it. I will see y'all with the video tomorrow.